Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yudalid Amud Aleph at the very top. Our Mishnah is focusing on the kara, the crossbeam, and says that the requirement of a kara that it be supporting an ariach. What is an ariach? Explains the Mishnah, a half of a levena. A levena is 3 tvachim wide and 3 tvachim long. So a half of a levena, in this case an ariach, would be half the width, 1.5 tvachim wide. And therefore the Mishnah states, as long as the kara, the crossbeam, is going to be the width of a tefach, whereby it will be supporting the ariach, is going to be valid for making a tiltul in the mavui. Ask the Gemara, tefach umechza boy. Why are we saying in the Mishnah that a tefach of a width of a mavui is sufficient if indeed the width of the ariach is 1.5 tefachim? Answers the Gemara, Kivan derochav lekabel tefach, ido chatzi tefach malabein le betino, mashu mehai giso, mashu mehai giso v'kaimo. The Gemara tells us that since it's already 1/2 tefach wide, so therefore the half tefach width is going to be sufficient to then mekabel the 1.5 tefach of the ariach, because the ariach will sit on the width of the mavui, of the kara, with 1/4 tefach on each side, which ends up being overlapping, whereby you can go ahead and cement clay on the bottom that's going to then close the part that is overlapping from the ariach on top of the kara. So that's sufficient. And over here again, it doesn't require that there actually be an ariach on it, and it also doesn't require that there also be clay that is cemented on it. But in potential, it could have that, and therefore it's satisfactory and valid. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi bar Rav Huna, Kara she'omru tzricha shtei bria kedei lekabel ariach. Rabbi, name of the son of Rav Huna, says that a kara that they stated, like we saw in the Mishnah, it has to have the strength to then mekabel in ariach. He goes on to say, Uma'amidei kara eina tzricham shiyu brin kedei lekabel kara ve'ariach. But the pegs, if you have pegs that are on either side of the walls of the mavui, that the kara is then being supported by, those do not have to then be strong enough to support the ariach and the kara. In other words, what he's saying is that since the whole hekir is ayidei, the kara, the crossbeam, so long as the crossbeam can support ariach, then it's going to be a valid kara, because then you see that the person who's putting the kara on is putting it there in the oifen kavua as a crossbeam for a mavui. But if it was something that's not able to support an ariach, then you see they just temporarily put it on, and therefore it's not going to be a proper heker for the mavui. But the pegs anyways are only holding up the ariach, and therefore, they're only up to the crossbeam, and therefore it doesn't have to be strong enough to also support the ariach. V'Rav Chizda Amar echad ze ve'echad ze tzrichin shibrin kedei lekabel kara v'ariach. Whereas Rav Chizda argues and says even the pegs as well as the crossbeam have to support the ariach. If it's not going to support the ariach, then that's going to be invalid for a kara. Rav Sheishes says, Heniach kara al gabe mavui uparas eleh machzeles. If a person takes a mat and he drapes it over the crossbeam, so he wants to, let's say, make it a stronger type of heker in his mind, and he does so, v'higbia min hakarka shloisha, and it's still going a height above 3 tefachim from the ground. So when he drapes it over, it doesn't go all the way down to the ground. It is still in the air beyond 3 tefachim high. Kara ein kan, mechitza ein kan. Rav Sheshes tells us that's not going to be a kara, neither will be a mechitza. both are going to be then invalid. Kara ein kan daha mechasya. It's not going to be a kara because the mat is now covering up the crossbeam, whereby it's no longer going to be a heker. Mechitza ein kan dahavila mechitza shehagdoim boikim bo. It's also not going to be a valid mechitza because you can have goats, little goats, that can walk underneath it, whereby it's not a valid mechitza. So therefore, it's not going to be either a kara nor a mechitza. Whereby, of course, the mavoi cannot be used to then metaltil inside of it. Tonu Rabbanon, the Gemara now brings the following brisa: Kara hayoitza mikoisel ze ve'ena nogas bikoisel ze. If you have a mavui and a kara going on top, of course, in the entrance to the mavui, but the crossbeam doesn't go all the way to the other end, to the other side of the mavui wall. It only starts from one mavui wall, but does not extend all the way to the other mavui wall. V'chein shtei karas achas yoitza mikoisel ze v'achas yoitza mikoisel ze ve'eno gas zu bezu. Or you have one part of the kara that goes out from one side of the wall, while the other one goes out from the other side of the wall, and they don't meet each other. There's a space in between. So the Brisa goes on to say, Pachos mishloisha ein tzorich lahavi kara acheres. Shloisha tzorich lahavi kara acheres. If it's less than three tvachim, either in the first case between the kara and the wall, or the second case between the two beams, then it's going to be valid because we'll say lavud. Within 3 tvachim, less than 3 tvachim, it's as if the place is closed. The area is closed in between, and therefore it's going to be a valid kara. However, if it's going to be beyond 3 tfachim, then we do not say lavud, and therefore you would have to then make another kara that would actually extend across. The Brisa goes on to say, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel oimer pachos midalid ein tzorich lahavi kara acheres, arba tzorich lahavi kara acheres. It should be read arba in the feminine, should be tfachim. If it's less than 4 tvachim, then we would say lavud. If it's 4 tvachim or beyond, we would not say lavud. This is a machlok that we saw earlier as well, that there's a machlok is what's considered to be lavud halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Is it less than 3 tvachim, or is it less than 4 tvachim? So here again we see the machlok is that Shimon Gamliel is of the opinion that even less than 4 tvachim is going to be lavud. The Brisa goes on to say, V'chein beis karos hamat'imos. If you have 2 twin karos that are going across the entranceway of the mavui, loy bezu k'dei lakabel ariach, v'lo bezu k'dei lakabel ariach. Neither one is going to be wide enough to mekabel in ariach, a half of a levena. Im mekabel is ariach l'rochboi tefach ein tzorich lahavi kara acheres. If, however, between the two of them, a ariach could be supported by the two of them. In other words, in combination there would be a tefach that can support an ariach, which, as we said, is a 1.5 tefachim. Then indeed it's valid. V'im lav tzorich lavi kara acheres. If not, you'd have to bring another kara. The Brisa goes on to say, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel oimer, im mekabeles ariach la'arkoi, Shloisha ein tzorich lahavi kara acheres, v'im lav tzorich lahavi kara acheres. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is of the opinion that these 2 twins, that if indeed you're able to then, between them, the space in between the 2 twins that are going across the entranceway of the mavui, if you could put the ariach lengthwise, and it will then fit on these 2 to be completely on top of these 2 cross beams, then it will be valid. In other words, if you have 3 tfachim that are going to then go from one of the cross beams to the other cross beam, and it will fit, then indeed that's enough, says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, to then validate the kara. So Ad Kan is the Brisa. Says the Gemara, Omar Abaye. I'm sorry, we have another statement that the Brisa continues and says, the Brisa goes on to say, Hayu achas lamala va'achas lamata. If you have one crossbeam high and on a lower level is another crossbeam, and each one is not going to be a full tefach. Says the Braisa, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Roin es ha'elyoina kilu hi lamata ves ha'tachton kilu lamala. We look at the top one as if it's below, and the bottom one as if it is above. In other words, we look at them as if they're now next to each other, even though they're not on the same height. Providing that the top one is not higher than 20 amos and the bottom was not lower than asara tfachim, then we can say that we look at it as if they're the same height, and it's going to validate the mavui. That's the brisa until now. Omar Abai now comments. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, the last part of the brisa that we quote in the name Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Savar la ki avua bechada, upolig aleh bechada. He holds like his father Rabbi Yehuda in one aspect, but he argues on his father in another aspect. Savar la ki avua bechada, the islay roin. He holds like his father in the aspect that Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah states that if you have a crossbeam that is not going to be strong enough to support an ariach, we view it, we're roying as if it is strong enough. So over here too, his son Rabbi Yossi says that even though they're not two crossbeams at the same height, but we will view it, we'll be roying as if they are the same height. Upolig aleh bechado, the ilu Rabbi Yehuda sover lemala me'esrim. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda sover b'toch chof in lemala mechof loy. Whereas in the case of the height, we saw in the first Mishnah Masechta that Rabbi Yehuda is the opinion that it doesn't have to be only 20 amos high, it can be higher than 20 amos, the mavui, the crossbeam. However, we see that Rabbi Yossi says that if the higher of the two crossbeams is beyond 20 amos, it's not going to be valid to then be viewed as if it's the same height as the lower one. So we see that Rabbi Yossi argues with his father Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the height of a mavui. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah that states the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rechava Afal Pi She'eina Beriya. He argues on the Tanakama, and he says that it doesn't have to be strong enough to support an ariach. Rather, we'll be roying as if it is strong enough, and that's enough. Masni le Rabbi Yehuda lechia barav kamei derav. Rabbi Yehuda taught this Mishnah to Chia, the son of Rav, in front of his father Rav. And he stated what it says in the Mishnah, that states that you can have a rechava, according to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, even though it is not bri, even though it's not strong enough to hold an ariach. That's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Omar le Rav then interjected, and he says, Asne rechava ubriya. Teach him that it has to be both rechava, the width to support an ariach, and also the strength to support the ariach. In other words, the shita of the chachamim are not like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Asked the Gemara, V'amar Rabbi Eloi, Amar Rav, but Rabbi Eloi said in the name of Rav himself, rechava arba afa pi she'eina bria, that it can be wide, even though it's not going to be strong enough to support an ariach. As long as it's wide enough that it's dalid tfachim, then it doesn't have to support an ariach. It doesn't have to have the strength. Answers the Gemara, rechava arba shiny. If it has the width of arba tfachim, then it's enough of a heker, and then in Nachanami it does not require the strength to support an ariach. But if it's less than that, Rav says the shita of the chachamim is how we follow, and therefore it has to be strong enough to support the ariach. The Gemara now quotes the Mishnah that states now that according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says according to the Shitosoi that even a kash or a kana, either straw or a reed as the crossbeam, that itself we will view it as if it is a mateches and therefore be a valid crossbeam. Ask the Gemara, my kamash malon. Damrin and roin. What are we coming to teach? That we say roin, we view the kash or the kana as if it's like a mateches, as if it's strong. Ask the Gemara, hainu hach. That's exactly what we just saw in the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda right before in the Mishnah, that states that if it's going to be something that is not strong enough to support an ariach, it's also valid. So it's the same halacha. So why do we have then what seems to be a repetition of the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda here in the Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, Mahu desema. Bimina amrinon shaloi bimina lo yamrin. You might have thought to say that if it's the same min, that means in the Reisha, there we're saying that it's wood, only it's not strong enough to support an ariach. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's still valid. However, in the Seifa, what we just quoted now, when it's coming to kash, straw, or kana, a reed, where it's a different type of min, in other words, it doesn't have itself the possibility of ever being strong enough to hold an ariach, like the wood, we might think that it's not going to be valid according to even Rabbi Yehuda. Kamash malam, we view it as if it's mateches, and we say that it is valid. The Gemara now quotes the next part of the Mishnah, akuma. If you have the kara that is akuma, that is bent, we view it as if it is straight, and therefore it's still valid even though it's bent. Frek the Gemara pshita, that's straightforward. Answers the Gemara, kamash malon to Rabbi Zera. It's coming to teach us like which Rabbi Zera taught. As follows: Dom Rabbi Zera. If you have a mavui, and in the entrance way of the mavui you have the kara, and the kara goes straight and then it bends outwards, it comes in and then continues straight to the end of the next wall of the mavui. He betoich esrim ve'akmumisu lemala me'esrim, or a case where the mavui is extending and it goes straight, and then it has a curve going up above esrim amma, and then goes down again to the best of the mavui. Or a case of hi lamala ma'asar v'akmumisa lamata me'asar. Or you have a case in the opposite way where the crossbeam is above 10 tfachim high, but the akmimus, the curve, the bend, goes beneath 10 tfachim and then bends back and goes above asar tfachim to the rest of to the other end of the mavui. Says Rabbi Zera, roin kol she'ilu yinata akmumisa. We view it as if the bent part was taken away. Ve'ein bein zeh lezeh shloisha ein tzarich lahavi kara acheres. So providing that you don't have a space of the bent part that is going to be beyond, going 3 tefachim or beyond, then you don't have to bring another kara. In other words, then it's going to be valid. However, if it's going to be 3 tefachim or more, then you would have to bring another kara because the bent part is going to be making it invalid. This also is simple. This is also straightforward because we know when it comes to less than 3 tefachim, we say lavud. So therefore, even if the bent part is above 20 amos, or if it's beneath asar tefachim, or if it goes outside, all of these cases we're going to say lavud, and as if it's going to be part of the straight part of the kara. So what is the chiddush? Answers the Gemara. Oh, the Gemara continues to ask. He betoich mavui vakum misa chutz lemavui. Answers the Gemara. He betoich mavui vakum misa chutz lemavui itzrichalei. No, the chiddush is in the case, the first case Rabbi Zera brought, where the crossbeam is going straight and then it bends outside of the mavui and then comes back. On that, there's a chiddush. Mao desema. You might think to say lechush dilma asila am shuche basra. You might think that a person who's inside the mavui can continue to walk and metaltil all the way through, even past where the bending part goes, even outside of the mavui. Kamash malon. Therefore, comes to teach us that we're not concerned about that, and we'll say lavud nonetheless. And therefore it's going to be a valid kara, validating the mavui for tiltul, of course only up until the place where the mavui ends, but we're not concerned that a person will metaltal outside where the curvature is beyond the mavui.